Hello and welcome to the latest edition of our GMCC Leaders Series. The idea behind this is quite simple. Every fortnight we invite a leader from somewhere across Greater Manchester. It could be a local political or a business leader to have a chat and answer some questions about themselves, the role they have and the wider context around Greater Manchester. We are recording these and we'll be publishing them on the Chamber's YouTube channel and also releasing them as a series of podcasts. So far on the series, we've had Robin Phillips from Siemens, the Chamber President. Then we had Tom Stannard, the Chief Executive Officer of Salford City Council. And today I'm really pleased to welcome Karen Smart, the Managing Director of Manchester Airport. Karen, welcome. And obviously you join us today at a particularly busy and possibly challenging time as well with the new travel restrictions, but we'll come to that in a minute or so. So first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, very interesting career background, and a little bit about why you wanted the job or why you got the job at Manchester Airport.
Brilliant. Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone. It's quite a circular path here in that I'm born and bred in the Northwest, born in Macclesfield, brought up in Stockport. And I, as a teenager, were unsure where I was going, what I was doing. So I left the Northwest and joined the Royal Air Force. And that was the start of my career. Intended moving away for just a couple of years, wanted to travel, play a bit of sport and actually start to think about what I wanted to do. But I ended up staying in the Air Force for 23 years in the end. Actually had some fantastic coaches, mentors who really helped me realise full potential. So I joined as an engineer and after 7-8 years, I then took an officer's commission and retrained as an air traffic controller and then spent my time as an air traffic controller before going into management. And it was really then as I approached that midlife crisis almost as to what do I do now and where do I go? And I wanted to go much more in a business environment. So for me, I took what was a fairly safe step at the time and joined Serco, who provided a lot of public sector support to the military, but as a sort of commercial entry into that, and did a number of roles, culminating with me running their air and aviation business as I developed my business acumen. And it was from there that I, 8 years ago now, joined MAG, Manchester Airport Group, as a lot know from the past. Initially, I joined at Stansted Airport as the customer service director, and Charlie Cornish, our group chief exec, again really keen on developing his leaders and his team, and said if ever you want to run your own airport you need to get some asset management experience, and put really the safety net around me to enable me to take on the asset management director role. And from there he asked me to run East Midlands Airport. Did that for a couple of years, fascinating role, because predominantly cargo in the UK, which led me then to, at the start of the pandemic, he asked me to step up and come and run Manchester Airport. So having left the Northwest now a long time ago, it's brilliant to be back here and, running the airport that I used to sit at the end of the runway with my dad and watch the planes go by.
Absolutely brilliant.
A little bit about, I'm a mum of 3 boys. The boys are not boys anymore, they're fine young men, in that I've got 24, 21 and 16-year-olds, so one is still at school. Currently we still live in the south, so I'm a weekly commuter, and that was just from when I left the military. We've never taken the boys out of school, so I'm here all week and I tend to be away at the weekends. So I've experienced the up and downs and the commuting, staying in a hotel where I'm the only person throughout the time of COVID. So it's been quite an interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I love that question. If you ever want to run your own airport, you need asset management. I don't suppose many people have probably ever had that asked of them by the boss, but I just think it's great. And like I said, a really interesting sort of background there. And obviously steeped in that sort of aviation bit, but also the management bit of it as well. And yeah, obviously if you're doing air traffic control at any level, you need to be organised and certainly focused and all the rest of it. Great attributes to get. And obviously you've been managing director, I think July last year. You came back north. as it were. And I guess there probably isn't one, but if you could just sort of outline what a sort of typical day looks like as managing director of Manchester Airport.
You're absolutely right. There is no typical day. But, you know, what would a routine day be in the normal operations? And we've been building back up to that more recently. So, you know, the first thing I do is have a look at the performance metrics. One of the things that I'd like to think I've brought in more throughout the 3 airports I've worked at, and certainly here, is really been leading and managing through data. So we do have now some real credible BI that tells us how we performed the day before. So it's managing through fact rather than feel. That's the sort of first role. And then I'll work with my operational leadership team on any hiccups we had over the day, what we're going to do to, what they're going to be doing really to put it right. They take total ownership for their operation and anything we need to look at. And then I tend to get involved in a series of governance meetings, whether that's business planning meetings, whether that's working externally with local leaders, with government. A lot of my day is actually focused on really promoting the airport, the activities we do, and making sure that we are a key contributor to the region. I'm sure we'll come on and talk about that. And actually that we're serving the needs of the region and the local people. So there's no typical day, but as I say, most of my day tends to be not literally physically leading the team, but really providing the governance so that my brilliant team here do a lot of that hands-on for me.
And I guess it's important because it's sort of like a little city that you've got there, isn't it? And the scale and size of it and everything. So, you know, the responsibilities and things obviously must be quite huge at times. And it's not just obviously the workforce, but it's also the numbers of passengers you've got as well that has got to have that experience.
It is, and the team that work for me are really only 10% of the overall team Manchester Airport, as you'd say, that are actually operating on the campus. That's currently, and also when we're at the height of what we were serving here in the Northwest. So, you know, the whole stakeholder relationships, working with other senior leaders on campus and off campus, so incredibly important.
Really interesting stuff. And the role and position of the airport. I mean, obviously, I think if you live anywhere around it, you know its importance, don't you? You know what a vital part of the regional, indeed the national economy that is, and it's recognised as the international gateway of the North. I just want to ask though, where you see it fitting in that sort of national aviation, you know, UK aviation picture, and things, for example, like, you know, the sort of competition, rivalry, or whatever it is with other airports, for example, like Heathrow. How does all that work, and how do you manage some of that, and, you know, how do you get on with other airports?
Yeah, and again, COVID's been an interesting time for that, because I think never ever has the aviation industry as a whole been closer than we are today, and united in what we're trying to, some of the challenges we're trying to work through. But look, Manchester Airport, we're the only airport outside of London that's got 2 runways. And, you know, so we've got massive opportunity to grow the services here for the region. And before the pandemic, we were serving around 210 destinations, and that's over 70 airlines with 30 million just under 30 million passengers. So there is no other airport that's got that quantum of destinations and airlines, bar Heathrow, as you say. So for that reason, we really do look at ourselves as that global gateway for the North. And, you know, the reality of it is the North is incredibly ambitious around its economics, and really the long-term ambition has got to be about having the right infrastructure so that we can realise that potential. And I think we've been doing our bit at the airport. Many of you will know about the first phase of our £1 billion plus transformation with the new terminal. And everybody who's been in there just sees what a fantastic asset that is, and really is world class and competes with any airport in the world. So, you know, in order to maximise the potential for the region, we've got to maximise the assets we've got at the airport, but also build them into a much wider transport network. So in 2019, We were focusing much more on direct connections, which helped to grow the economy. And again, the China connection was a really positive story for the North. And we saw a steady increase in new routes over the last 10 years, Hong Kong, Beijing, the American routes of where they are. So this has really helped us to prove that we are that global gateway. It has dropped off with COVID. There's more we need to do to get them back, but it does support billions of pounds of economy for the North.
Yeah, where do you see Manchester fitting in with the other airports in the UK? Is it a sort of complementary bit, or how does that work from a UK aviation perspective?
Yeah, I think it is complementary, and particularly if you look at it in the airports from the Midlands up in the North. During COVID, we collectively were writing to government to say that we all stand behind some of the asks that we were working to. And, recently I spoke with John, who runs John Lennon Airport at Liverpool. And as he says, they've got a very different offering of what Liverpool, John Lennon's offering compared to what Manchester Airport. Nobody else is able to offer that real global gateway. So I think, bar Heathrow, who've got those multiple destinations and the airlines, that's what we are offering for the North.
Yeah, good stuff. You mentioned it, and obviously it's been completely remiss, but the impact of COVID and maybe Brexit to a lesser or greater extent, who knows really, but obviously the last 18 months or so, and certainly your time at Manchester has been dominated by the pandemic and the impact of that. And it's interesting because we're talking today, and this is the day when new travel restrictions come in for inbound passengers coming into the UK. How easy is it when government turns round and says, well, we need these introduced in 48 hours? What is that like from your perspective, running a major international and global destination like that it's going to impact you first more than anywhere else in the country? What does that actually feel like when you see that? I presume your heart sinks a little bit, or is it a case of here we go again and you roll your eyes? I'd just be curious to find out a little bit more about that.
I think, you said about how impacted the industry has been, and the Office of National Statistics has highlighted that aviation has been the worst hit sector for the pandemic. So that's really clear. And just to put into context what that is, we talked before about just shy of 30 million passengers. At the height of the pandemic, or actually in each lockdown, because it's not just been one, we've seen passenger numbers reduced to 1 or 2% of what the normal levels are. So, at the quantum of impact for our colleagues, at the peak really, at any one time, we had 75% of staff furloughed. Sadly, we now employ 30% fewer colleagues than we did previously prior to the pandemic. But, we hit it head on. We've always been very much at the forefront, MAG as a group, in being out there and leading in aviation. We tend to find out from what's happening from the media rather than from government directly, which is always a challenge. And it's been one of the real criticisms we've had of government during the course of the pandemic. But, if we look back to June of last year, 2020, just as I was coming to Manchester, we instigated the wearing of face masks at the airport as just one of the measures that at the time we were the leading airport group to do that, and to say that actually we want to make sure that colleagues, that our customers feel safe if they're able to travel. So, as a business, we always were incredibly resilient. We've learned to be even more resilient than they are. And I think the piece that we've been calling for all along is transparency of that data. If we could see and understand how government were coming to their decisions, making their decisions, that would be much easier for us to predict and manage. Where we found ourselves throughout the course of the pandemic today is initially on the back foot, having to hear what the plans are, and then very quickly get to the front foot and say, operationally, how are we looking at impacting? And again, the most recent restrictions that have come in play, very much that's what we're finding ourselves now. We're so close to Christmas. What's that going? We were just ramping up to get back to what was getting near normal, 70% of near normal traffic levels. Suddenly the restrictions have gone in, and it's so incredibly difficult to predict what customers are doing with their confidence being dented.
It's that lack of certainty, isn't it, as well? We were
Lack of
just having a quick
certainty.
chat about that as well. It's making it so difficult to sort of plan ahead of forecast with any clarity, really, and that's obviously so vital for any business, whatever size it is. Just, I mean, just one other thing, I mentioned it in there, but at this point, I mean, obviously COVID and the pandemic is sort of the number one issue and challenge, I guess, really, for things. Anything at all on the back of Brexit that's impacted? I mean, obviously, I would imagine in your previous job, like you said, at East Midlands, I would imagine that's had a huge impact there from the point of view of the movement of freight. But is there anything at Manchester that you can say, well, actually, that, you know, Brexit's caused that. We weren't having to do that before, but we are now. Is there anything that you could share with us about that?
No, I don't think we're seeing really the full impact of Brexit yet. I do think where it's going to manifest itself is as we start to resource up and start to think about resource. You know, I was talking to Tony Danker in the CBI recently, and he talks about the missing million employees that have just gone from the job market. And actually, when you start to look for those semi-skilled workers, which the airport really has got great opportunities for so many, what we're seeing is that there just isn't the workforce out there in the same way. So I think that's, from a Manchester Airport perspective, one of the biggest impacts we're going to see from Brexit.
Yeah, and again, the number of businesses that are having similar sort of conversations with us at present around that is worryingly high. But again, it's another challenge we've got to face in a series of them, isn't it? Really, at present. I just want to look a little bit into the future now, Karen. Obviously, we're getting back, or you're getting back to nearly, not quite pre-pandemic levels, but you mentioned there, 70% of normal levels for traffic, pending whatever happens with further restrictions. Obviously, you've got a massive development program going on at the airport, and the updated terminal and everything is absolutely superb. What else is there to come with that, and also some route developments? And where do you see those key sort of market and growth areas being over the next couple of years? I know it's difficult. It's probably a difficult question at any time, but as we're sat here today with everything that's going on, it may be a little bit more tricky. But can you give us a bit of an insight as to where you can see that development coming? And I always like new routes being announced by the airports. It's quite exciting sometimes. So you give us a bit of an insight into that as well, if you can.
Yeah, I think, look, we were bouncing back really quickly. I think what's become completely evident since the restrictions were lifted back in September, October, we had an incredibly busy half-term week. People were there wanting to travel on predominantly leisure, but business as well. And there's a lot of pent-up demand, not just in Europe, but in going to the Middle East and beyond, but also the minute that the US opened up for the double vaccinated, we started to see the uptake there. So what we're saying though now, we've had another bump in the road with this latest set of restrictions, and consumer confidence without doubt has been dented again. One of the leading measures we get at the airports is on the car park bookings and the lead time that people are booking in, whereas it started to stretch back out. People were now thinking about next year's holidays, and suddenly the booking curve becomes much shorter and people are almost booking for this weekend or next week. So it's a case of people are not looking too far out where they are. But, it will come back, and once the restrictions lift, it'll come back quickly. People need confidence, they need some certainty. And what we've been working incredibly hard on all along is keeping the relationships with the airlines. There are no airlines really who are saying they're not going to come back. It's just a case of when they start to come back to the airport. And also we've seen new airlines that have come in, even in these trying times that we've got today. So Aer Lingus, as an example, brilliant to see them come and really establish the first UK base here in Manchester for long-haul services across the Atlantic. New York started last week. They've got Barbados that started in October, and Boston's next to come in the new year. And then there are other airlines who are re-emerging and re-establishing themselves at Manchester to get those routes back. So you ask about where we're going to be focusing in the long term, and I talk about Global Gateway of the North. So it's no surprise to you that the long haul is what we want to, make sure that we work hard to get the growth and that get those connections. I think one of the things that might be interesting for the listeners today is, whenever we've had bumps in the road in the past in aviation, what we've seen is that the short haul, the low cost carriers particularly, have always bounced back quicker and bounced back stronger. And actually what they've done is taken a little bit of the market share each time they've done that. So, we're already seeing that some of our low cost carriers are actually looking to be more aggressive than ever next year as we bounce back out of the pandemic. But in reality, to get the airport back up to the passenger numbers that we had pre-pandemic, it could take us till somewhere like 2024. And that's predominantly as we slowly start to rebuild those long haul services that we aspire to have. North America, East Coast and Canada, as well as Asia.
Good stuff. And it's great. You mentioned there about the Aer Lingus arrival and the new hub and one thing and another, and sometimes that gets lost a little bit with everything else that's going on. And we try, obviously, at the Chamber, which are working in partnership with yourselves, to let people know those good news stories. And it's always worthwhile just reminding people, isn't it? That
it is.
That there is still growth going on out there, even though it all feels a little bit fragile and a little bit not right at present, but there's some good news stories out there.
Yeah.
I'm just going to move now onto an issue point. I mean, obviously, a few weeks ago we had COP26. It feels like a long time ago, if you can recall that. Obviously, aviation is sometimes, you can't mention aviation and net zero, without having a good discussion about it. Obviously, it is a challenge for the sector, isn't it? There's no two ways about it. The net zero and low carbon bit. What's the airport doing to tackle that and to obviously make sure that it plays its part in the move to a low carbon or a zero carbon economy?
Yeah, you're right. Aviation is it's an easy target in some ways, but actually decarbonisation is one of the biggest challenges that we face in the industry. But as an industry, we are rising to it and we do have a plan. So if we look at our 3 airports, we were the first carbon neutral airports in the UK, and we have set ourselves the target of reaching net zero by 2038, very much in line with Manchester and other targets in the north. And that's, important to us. I think technology we need to introduce that will it reduces and then eliminates the carbon emissions. It is being developed, and the current generation of aircraft engines are around 20% more efficient than the last generation, and the next will be even more efficient than those that we have today. So we've very much been at the forefront. We've got some amazing people who are really helping us to be a leader in this industry and in terms of decarbonisation. And really under our chairmanship, we've the industry-wide body of sustainable aviation launched the decarbonisation roadmap, and that sets out how we'll get to net zero as an industry by 2050. And MAG's one of the only 2 airport groups on the government's Jet Zero Council, which really brings government and the industry all together in this space. So look, a couple of initiatives that we've the things that we've done and I should talk about. So in October, we signed an MOU with Fulcrum Bioenergy to become one of the first airports in the UK to have direct pipeline of sustainable aviation fuel, which will come from Fulcrum. And that will be a real game changer for us because, of course, there's very little needs to happen to some of the conventional aircraft in order to take those fuels. But also we've launched a partnership with Carbon Click, and that allows passengers, regardless of where they're flying from or to from the airport, to offset their flight emissions. Go onto our website, say where your journey is, and that will work out exactly how you can contribute and offset the carbon emissions. So, we can't do it alone, though. This is a global problem. And what we need in order to meet our targets is governments to invest. And, brilliant example of that will be that they need to build up significant sustainable aviation fuel capabilities across the UK. And, you know, then as an industry, we can come a long way from where we are today.
You saw that starting point, and again, that wider picture, isn't it? You know, it's not down to one or two individual companies or anything. Everyone's got a part to play in that. So a link to that, and it probably plays a part in that, is a few weeks ago we had the integrated rail plan released by government, which well, was mildly disappointing in a lot of aspects, to be quite honest. And I don't think Manchester got away too badly with it, to be quite honest. But obviously we've got to look at the bigger picture. People are probably listening to this wondering, well, what on earth are they talking about rail for with an airport? But it's a vital bit, isn't it? How important is it to the airport that ground transport link is as effective and as widespread as it can be? Because if you get that bit right, you potentially then start to reduce the number of car journeys, don't you, to the airport, and green it up even more. How important is it that, like I said, that the airport is fully connected and better connected by ground transport means than it currently is?
Yeah, and you know, I spoke earlier about if we're going to really drive the greatest economic benefit from the north, then we need to make best use of the assets and have the right infrastructure in place. So look, we're still analysing what the integrated rail plan means for the airport. It's the timeline, you know, it's not meant to be delivered till 2040, and that's still some way off. And of course, we've got the funding considerations that all need to happen. But we're in discussions. We're pleased that the airport station is committed to, subject to the funding discussion. But we need to understand a lot more about that. You're right, I think Manchester probably fared better than a majority of the north. And I know that some towns are really disappointed in where it is. But in reality, what it does is it puts the airport at the heart of the northern powerhouse rail, and it will deliver a step change in some direct journey times. Liverpool, I think we're currently at 71 minutes, and that's the potential to reduce it down to about 26 minutes. So that's really good. And Leeds, I travelled to Leeds recently for a meeting, and it was quite painful, and that's got the opportunity to reduce that down from 90 minutes down to 40 minutes. It is a shame that some areas will lose out on getting that improved access to the airport. I know Bradford, Sheffield, incredibly disappointed because they also see how Manchester Airport is a real key enabler for them and their global gateway to where they need to go to. So look, well, in perspective, our catchment of the airport, whilst we've done really well in increasing the users pre-pandemic, we lag well behind that of Heathrow and Gatwick, and they've both benefited from significant government investment into the rail infrastructure linking the airports. So, you know, without that investment, it's much harder for people across the north to access those global connections, because you're right, people want to get off the road and onto the public transport, but only when it's easy to use and has got that real connectivity. So, you know, we did work with a survey to look at how people want to travel more sustainably, and between 17, 18, 18, 19, we saw a 23% almost growth in passenger entries and exits, and that was the second highest increase in England, behind only London Bridge Station, which, as those listeners know, is incredibly busy. So it's, you know, the rail plan is incredibly important to us, and that integrated transport plan is the only way we're going to get the most economic benefit.
Yeah, excellent. Of course, it also works for incoming passengers as well, isn't it? When they step out of the terminal into a transport hub, they want really good connections to where they need to get to as well, isn't it? You know, it is that
the inbound tourism
flow.
is such a huge economic driver for the north, and you know, at the moment we're not really seeing a plan from government that's enticing people back into, and we know that it brings an awful lot of benefit to the economy.
Yeah, that's good stuff, and hopefully something we're keeping our eyes on as well, that inbound bit of the equation as well. Kind of just one final question really, and quite an open one really, is how optimistic are you for the future of the sector, you know, as well as Manchester Airport itself, but the sector in a more general feeling really? How optimistic are you?
Look, I'm in really a glass half full rather than a glass half empty. So you're always going to get positivity out of me. But the reality of it is we have had bumps in the road as a sector previously. And we've always recovered from it, not just back to where we were, but bounce back stronger. So it is a global sector. It's one that if we don't do our bit as the UK and enable flights in the UK, we'll just get bypassed as an island. And, we've got our bit to do. So I'm incredibly optimistic. We know, talking to airlines, they're keen to fly back to Manchester, as well as the UK in a whole. And it's just a matter of when government unleashes us to allow people to build the confidence and travel. We saw it over October half work. We saw it in the build up to Christmas, until we've just had this little bump in the road. People will be back, and we are now, we're global animals. We want to get out there and travel, be it on business or be it for leisure.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen, for your time today, and some great answers there. And certainly that last answer there has filled me with a bit of get up and go for the rest of the day and possibly the week as well. But great to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time this morning with us, and thank you to everyone for joining us as well for an absolutely fantastic conversation. 30 minutes has just absolutely whizzed by there. There's probably a whole another 30 minutes we could have gone on for on some of those issues, but Karen, love to have you back sometime in the future when things are more normal than they are at present, and just to see where next for Manchester Airport and that continued growth there and success story, and it is really truly one of the top regional assets that we've got. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we get over all these restrictions at present, then we can get some sustained growth in there. Karen, thank you for joining us today.
Welcome.
And again, thank you all for joining us on this Leaders Series event. Thank you.